Well, this is probably a really good time to record a video about sensory sensitivities between the light flickering and the fact that I'm getting a little, I think they're brain zaps because I waited to take my medication a little too long, like an hour or so later than usual. It kind of feels like a frame rate issue where like if I turn my head, it's just like there's like a mental popping kind of situation, and it feels like my brain hasn't caught up with what it's seeing yet. It's weird. It's a little unsettling. Maybe I should talk to my doctor about it, but I feel like I'm pretty jaded at this point. Just often feels like, what's the fucking point? They're just gonna be like, oh, you're fine. I think the only time a doctor wasn't like, oh, you're fine, was when I had appendicitis, when they were like, oh, you're probably fine. So I have an ASD assessment in about a week, and I intended to make a bunch of videos going over all of the... My boyfriend's playing chess, loud sighs, if you can hear that. No, he's humming to himself. I intended to make a bunch of videos going over all of the possible symptoms and traits that seem like they might be related and may be relevant to a diagnosis. So this video is specifically about sensory problems or sensitivities, or I guess hypo and hypersensitivities. So hypersensitivity is when you're extra sensitive, and hyposensitivity is when you're not quite sensitive enough. I think I'm mostly hypersensitive though. I kind of wanted to organize this by senses instead of just running down a list of bullet points. Loud playing. I should probably close the window, but smells like rat piss in here. Sorry, no, it's mouse piss. It's mouse piss. My hair feels so dry. My scalp is so itchy all the time. So fucking itchy. I have pretty bad eczema, and I make it worse by just scratching at it because I have no self-control. Okay, so let's start with smell and taste. I was a picky eater as a kid. Luckily, my parents were pretty chill about it, and like pretty chill in general, so if something bothered me, they for the most part were like, cool, you don't have to eat it, you don't have to wear it, whatever. So it was kind of a non-issue until I was old enough to like register anxiety, at which point I started to get pretty anxious about food, particularly I think food from unpredictable sources. So like if we were going to a restaurant that I'd never eaten at and I didn't know, how am I going to know if I like the food if I don't get to see it and try it? But then you order this meal and then you're stuck with it. And it was a big deal, like mentally to me. It sounds nuts. I guess it is nuts, but like I had a big, I guess I have had emetophobia. It used to be pretty bad. So fear of vomiting. And I used to think about this way too much when I was at restaurants. Anyway, yeah, it was hard to find things that I liked. And I think when I was a kid, I wanted to have things kind of separated, not really touching, or at the very least, I don't want to mix things into bites. Anything that's like, if I can't identify each aspect of the food, it used to upset me. Still a little bit, although I've gotten much better, much less picky with a lot of practice. And I've even gotten to the point where I'm sort of an adventurous eater where I like want to try weird things. I've tried like fermented shark is probably the weirdest thing I've had. Sensitivity and food anxiety still flares up. Like a friend recommended I try Swedish pizza and specifically recommended a pizza with shrimp and bananas and curry powder on it. And when I ordered it, I spent the hour until it was delivered just like reliving all my childhood anxieties, basically feeling nauseated preemptively. I managed to swallow a bite. It was better than I expected, but it was still just like, oh, I felt so gross for that whole, oh god. Anyway, even though I was a picky eater when I was a kid, I didn't like bland foods particularly. I liked spicy foods, and as an adult, I'm still just sort of like, whatever the strongest flavors you can get, I would like those. To some extent, I think most of my issues are textural rather than flavor related, although now I take it back. My mental narrative up until I started looking into Asperger's syndrome was that in college, I was sort of forced to eat food I normally would have been disturbed by. So living in the dorms, you eat at the cafeteria, the food there is not great. In high school, I kind of got around cafeteria food. I mean, partially I went to a small school and we had like a chef or whatever. It was small enough that like one guy with a couple of assistants was able to cook for everybody. And like all of his food was good, but I was really picky. So I would eat either, if he made pasta, I would eat that, even though it was a weird sort of pasta with a weird sort of sauce I normally wouldn't touch. And literally any other day, I would eat chili cheese fries. And I'm sure it looked like, oh, this, spoiled brat just really likes chili cheese fries and has no self-control. Like, no, I like chili cheese fries, but it's not like, I wasn't ordering them because I liked them. I was ordering them because the idea of eating whatever other food was on offer was too disturbing. So college comes around, and I'm stuck with their cafeteria food. What I thought was that I just kind of brute forced my brain into accepting all of these weird, gross things, and then I just got used to eating gross food, and it didn't really bother me so much anymore. And I thought this for years. And then my sense of smell started to come back, because around high school, I think, is when I started to lose my sense of smell. I was pretty much anosmic, like almost fully anosmic for a good, is that like 10 years-ish? And just like within the last year, I've started to be able to smell and taste fairly consistently. And what I've discovered now that I can taste foods that I used to enjoy is that actually most foods still fucking disgust me. Like, I've never been a huge fan of like meats and stuff, mostly because the textures are like weird. I don't like all the different, like the fat bits and all. I don't understand how people can chew through them. They creep me out. But now that I can smell and taste, there's this extra layer of like this weird meat flavor, this like meaty aftertaste that just feels like death to me. Not even in like I would like to be a vegetarian, but I don't have like strong negative feelings about eating meat. But the taste is just too much. One thing that alerted me to the fact that this is actually pretty weird is that it occurred to me to ask people on Twitter in a poll, how many of you feel like you have to treat yourself to something kind of nice, like a dessert after your meals because you're kind of disgusted by what you just ate? Recovering. It's kind of like needing to recover the psychic damage you just took. And it turns out most people don't feel like that ever. So yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of anxiety around eating, not least because it is hard to find things that don't in some way require me to, like, mentally force myself to overcome disgust. When it comes to just smell, specifically, while it's been great to be able to smell things like spices and, I guess, I don't know, flowers or whatever, like lotions I can smell now, that's pretty cool, like nice soaps. Most things smell disgusting, and honestly, I don't think it's worth it. Anosmics have disproportionately high rates of suicide, but at this point, I really don't understand why. Every time I have to go to take out the trash now, it's like, ugh. Now that I've started to seriously entertain the idea of being autistic, I've somehow gotten into the habit of going like this. I don't think I did it quite right, but every time I'm sort of disgusted by something or upset and need to just kind of shake the feeling off, so every time, now it's my ritual, every time I take out the trash, I like turn away from it and I go, and then I don't think I make that face. I probably do make that face. And then I walk back into the house. Not only is my sense of smell back, but I think it might actually be unusually keen, unfortunately for me. I want to say like 2 months ago now, we had an incident in my apartment where I came into the apartment from the laundry room and I tell my boyfriend, like, hey, it smells kind of like sulfur in there. It's pretty gross. And he was like, yeah, sulfur is what, like, is the smell they put into gas so that when there's a gas leak, you'll know. And I was like, well, shit, I guess we should call the gas department and let people know. So it was this whole awkward incident. Turned out not to be gas, but the smell got worse and it was in our kitchen and it was increasingly gross, and it turned out to be mice. And now our entire apartment smells of mice, except you kind of don't notice because you get used to it, but every time you walk in the door from outside, you're like, f***ing mice. It's really intense though, like about 3 feet from me by our sink. Before we realized what it was, and I just thought it was some weird musty thing, I think we thought it was plumbing, I don't know, we just thought it was something normal-ish. Because I'm not used to smelling things, so I don't know when it's weird for things to smell bad. I spent about a week working over at our tiny little coffee table, really like hurting my back because I was just psychically kind of disturbed by the smell in here. Anyway, it's pretty weird to be kind of obsessed with food, but also to be really disturbed by most food. So, sense of touch. All right, it's hard to introduce things. Touch. I've heard like sensitivity to touch kind of being described, or really to any senses being described as like being able to feel and sense everything at once. And I do think that's pretty much the case for me. It's certainly not as intense as a lot of experiences I've heard, but like I can feel these freaking, I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see them. I'm wearing the Calmer, I think is what they're called, by like Flare Audio. It's supposed to help filter out some of the more irritating frequencies, I guess, to like keep you from being too stressed out somehow. I figured it's worth a shot, because once I decided to start looking into autism, I figured, all right, why don't I just try getting some earplugs and seeing if cutting out noise helps me be less anxious. And it seems to have helped. I've used normal earplugs and also these. These don't cut, like, people talking and stuff like that, and don't make me feel like I'm in a fishbowl, and don't exaggerate any noises coming out of me. So it's preferable but less effective. But yeah, I can feel these the whole time they're in. I don't know if I ever stop noticing them. It's pretty annoying, but it's maybe slightly less annoying than the sounds they filter out. Though I've skipped ahead to a different sense. All right. I guess touch and sound can be combined because my sound list is not super extensive. I used to be really sensitive to loudness when I was a kid, I think. Particularly movie theaters, like that THX, I don't know what you call that. But you know when you go to the movie theater and like the THX logo comes up and it like goes, I used to get like really stressed out about that and have to cover my ears because it was just so, it was like unbearably loud, and I would wonder how other people didn't feel like, you know, it was gonna hurt them somehow. I don't think I experienced physical pain though. I hear about a lot of sensitivities are physically painful to people, and I mostly don't experience that, except with, I think, cymbals are often physically painful. I don't really understand why anybody thought it was a good idea to have cymbals as part of music. Yeah, I could absolutely do without any metallic sounds whatsoever, I think. Metal is just gross. That brings us back to touch. There are a lot of textures that I'm really partial to and really sensitive, not like really sensitive to. There's some textures I'm really sensitive to. I'm not a big fan of metal. Like, I can tolerate it, but it kind of gives me a little bit of a squick feeling. Depends on how it's finished, I guess, or how it, whatever the, you know, there's different metal textures, but they're all a little bit iffy. I'm not super into them. They feel gross. The big killer is unfinished wood or unvarnished wood. It's not always horrible, and it's always worse if my hands feel dry, but like there's some wooden things that I just can't even, like when they give you a wooden spoon with your ice cream, that type of thing it's like the mental, wooden ice cream spoons and things like that for me are the textural equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. We used to have a knife, or a couple of knives in my mom's place that had these like wood inset in the handles, and I just refused to touch them. Like, I used to force myself to sometimes because I thought I'd get over it, and like at a certain point I was just like, there's no reason to torture myself this way. It's fucking horrible. Plastic is my favorite texture, pretty much any type of plastic, but especially like the slicker kind of. Somebody's like drilling in the next room. This is good timing. I'm like a huge fan of like laminate flooring. It fills me with joy, and everybody's like, oh, it's so cheap, hardwood is better. Like, absolutely not. Give me laminate any day of the week. I'm pretty particular about things that I put on my body. Not clothes as much as you'd think. There are definitely some textures that it's kind of like, like when I was a kid, I think I refused to wear jeans, which wasn't a big deal because my mom didn't care about forcing me into stuff I didn't want to wear. And I definitely have had some sensitivity to tags, but nothing extreme. Sorry, there's like something gross in my pants. But I find it really irritating to wear anything on my feet or my hands. I don't get used to them, or maybe I've not worn them long enough to get used to them, but I'm pretty sure I'm just not capable of getting used to them. So sometimes I'll wear jewelry, But usually I can't be bothered, and when I do, I'm usually constantly fidgeting with it because it's irritating. Um, as for feet, like socks, I hate socks, and I hate shoes. Like, they're not horrible, horrible, horrible. I can do it. I will go out in public wearing shoes, and I won't be totally miserable. But wearing shoes and socks inside the house, apart from shoes just being gross inside the house, like, I don't want things on my feet. I want them to breathe. I want them to be happy. Oh, back to the texture thing. Wood isn't the only issue. Other tree products, I guess, can be. Paper, I kind of hate the texture of paper, which is really funny because I've been like an artist my whole life and I used to work a lot with paper, and it's just like not so bad when I'm well moisturized, but it's upsetting. Speaking of upsetting paper related things, when people have pencils and the eraser nib is gone, oh god, it's so gross to think about. And there's just the metal thing, and then it like scrapes against the paper because somebody's trying to erase with it. It's so gross. Sorry. Yeah, and like people touching metal to their teeth, like when you can hear them scraping metal along their teeth. Somehow like moving my body in weird ways helps get the gross feeling out. I think that's normal actually for people. I don't know. I also have, very particular preferences about like cottons and stuff. Like I used to get mad when my mom was doing my laundry and she would like wash my cotton clothes but not put it through the dryer because then it's all like dry and crunchy and horrible. I also get like hideously distracted and uncomfortable by the sort of like weird sticky feeling behind my ears or like in my hair, I guess, after waking up, especially if it's been warm the night before. Or if I like take a shower, wear a shower cap, and then accidentally get some of the hairs back there wet, it's just like, fuck. Definitely not the nails on the chalkboard situation, but it's just really hard to... It's not like it's really hard to concentrate, but I'm always aware of it and always a little bit squicked out. And yet, I don't shower as often as I should. I wear makeup sometimes, but usually not, because I can pretty much constantly feel it on my face, and I don't know, like, I'll forget it's there sometimes, and then I'll be rubbing my face and rub it off, but it's like, I feel like I can always feel, especially foundation, it's just like this goopy shit all over. But even, like, stuff on my eyes, it usually makes me feel tired, because it feels like there's something weighing them down. It's very strange. I'm not sure if this is a hyposensitivity, but I do tend to not notice when I'm bleeding. Like if I get a little nick or like if I accidentally scrape off a scab or something, I usually find out because I've smudged blood on something. I think the other day I had something like I'd cut my foot or something and or I must have nicked myself shaving maybe, and I was just like, there was like a bloody footprint in the bathroom, and that was what alerted me to the fact that I had injured myself. It's funny thinking about all these different types of sensitivities because I hadn't recognized that I was in any way a sensitive person until looking into this stuff and actually paying attention to all of the different things that tend to upset me to different degrees. And I think talking to my therapist about this was what kind of sold him on the idea that actually I might be on the spectrum. Because I was like, I don't have that many sensitivities. And he was like, okay, so what about sound? And I was like, oh, well, I am sensitive to this. Okay, what about vision? Well, I am sensitive to... So, when it comes to vision, I'm pretty light sensitive. I don't know if it's technically photophobia, but it has been suggested that does seem to fit. My assumption was that it was purely migraine related, but now that I'm aware of it, it seems unlikely that this is a new phenomenon for me, or a new experience for me. Sunlight is pretty much always too bright. If it's overcast, I'm much, much happier. But at night, like, street lights and headlights are too bright, so I could try wearing my sunglasses, which I have been doing lately, but it's something about the contrast is really jarring. And in that case, I think it's a bit painful. I set up any television that I have with migraine settings, so I'll adjust the contrast and the colors and things so that it's visible but minimally painful when I have a migraine. But I realized recently that actually it's much more comfortable at all times. So I now drive my boyfriend insane by constantly switching the TV from like the really vivid, painful bright colors to like a nice grayish sort of thing. I hear that people with depression actually see the world in closer to grayscale or like lower saturation. And it kind of makes me feel like, wow, maybe I should try to acquire depression. Maybe I would be happier. I also get this thing sometimes if I'm outside and it's bright out and I'm looking at a flat colored, light colored surface like the sky or a sidewalk, where I'll see a weird vortex superimposed over my vision, and it's like these swooshing, shadowy, sort of rainbowy, shadowy shapes being sucked towards a center point, sort of like an iris. It's pretty weird. I only noticed it like 5 years ago or so, and most people I've asked about it are like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, including doctors. But I do actually have a friend who's also experienced this. And when I asked Reddit, best last resort for this sort of thing, somebody suggested it was photophobia, which actually makes a lot of sense. Here's sort of a grab bag of like things that might be related to sensory sensitivities, but I don't actually know if that's what's going on. Things like going to the mall used to give me a headache after like an hour or so. I'm assuming it might be something to do with like the bright lights and like it's a little bit loud. It's been a while since I've been to a mall actually, but I think I just tend to get a little bit up after I'm out of my home base for longer than 30 minutes maybe. I also tend to like kind of power down, not to the extent of what I've heard an autistic shutdown is like, but if I haven't eaten in a long time, especially if I'm out of the house and I haven't eaten in a long time. But it also seems to happen even when I have eaten sometimes, and I thought it was because I was maybe dehydrated just by virtue of, like, I'm constantly sipping water at home, so maybe I just need a lot more water than most people. But I think there's a strong possibility that it's actually just cumulative sensory overload. I seem to have inordinate difficulty parsing speech against background noise. So if I'm at a bar and somebody's trying to talk to me, it's just like, what's even the point? Like, I have to ask you to repeat yourself like 5 times. I don't understand why people try to talk at loud restaurants and that kind of thing. And at this point, most of the TV I watch with subtitles because it just saves a lot of mental energy trying to figure out what the hell anybody's saying against the loud background music and the background noises and whatever else. This one might be more of an anxiety thing, but I used to be scared to cross large streets by myself up until I started doing it kind of regularly in like, I don't know, like high school, maybe after? I'm not even sure. It was like pretty late. I always thought that it was because I didn't have enough practice doing it because I guess I always went out with my parents. But in retrospect, it's possible that it may have just been too much sensory input. You know, like you've got all these cars coming at you and the lights and like trying to figure out what the hell's going on and how not to hurt yourself. I don't know. I need a really specific sleep setup in order to sleep comfortably, but I never feel well rested regardless. I don't know. That's probably a separate thing. But separate from sensitivities, not necessarily separate from possible autism. Also in the category of sensitivities, I'm extremely sensitive to medications. And I think to most things you put in your body, really. Like pretty sensitive to caffeine, but not sensitive to caffeine withdrawal. So I don't know what's up with that. Like huge lightweight when it comes to alcohol. I'm sure some of it is just because I'm a relatively small person. I'm like 118 pounds or something. But like, even accounting for my size, if you take the minimum dose that a doctor normally prescribes any medication, and you take it down to like a quarter of that dose, that's usually the appropriate starting dose for me. Good luck convincing a doctor of that, though. Now, I've had 1 or 2 people who've been accommodating it and been like, okay, we'll try a half dose, but I don't know if I've persuaded anyone to go to a full quarter dose. So the medication I'm on now, I'm still at the lowest prescribed dose. It was recommended early on that I try it, see how it goes, and then double that dose. But I never did because it's already pretty intense. I think it was like a few weeks before I stopped getting weird brain zaps and like my heart feeling like it was kind of like stuttering. I don't know, maybe that's dangerous, but I associate that with, sort of feels the same to me as brain zaps. Anyway, that was my long-ass laundry list of all the sensitivities I could think of. One of the most interesting things to me about Asperger's and sensitivities is that when I talked to several people who had actually been diagnosed with Asperger's or autism, they basically all said, like, yeah, I hadn't realized how sensitive I was to these things until my diagnosis or until I started learning about these things, at which point I became aware of all of the stuff that I spent all of my life thinking I just had to tolerate and thinking that everybody else just dealt with. And that's, I mean, I've been having that experience for sure. We have an air conditioning unit right in the living room by the couch, and like a few feet from my boyfriend's computer that has a loud ass fan. And so between those two things, it's just like the living room is super loud all the time. And I don't notice that it's stressful, but when I walk over to the bedroom, I'll feel myself like decompressing a little bit. And maybe it's just some weird psychological effect of finding the bedroom cozier, but I do suspect that it's actually like, oh, the bedroom is significantly quieter. Brains are weird, man. Anyway, I don't place high odds on finishing this, odds. I don't place high odds on finishing this little series before I go in for my assessment, so probably the next video, if I don't know one way or another whether I'm autistic, I'll at least be one step further along in the process. Goodbye, friends. I don't know what that was. I'm just gonna wax on, wax off.